Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
So when we left you last week, we knew that a hurricane was coming. We knew that by the time it reached somewhere, wherever you are, whether it's in North Georgia or throughout the Southeast, you are going to be dealing with at least a tropical storm. Here's what I did. I'll give you a little behind the curtains look at how the Ron Show was put together last week. Fearing that I wasn't going to have power, maybe water, or any of that stuff, and having lived through a few of these hurricanes before, living in Louisiana and on the South Carolina coast, I had water in containers in fact, I think I still have some water in containers in the fridge, and went ahead and pre-produced my shows for Thursday and Friday just to be on the safe side. I had great guests, by the way. Check them out at ronshowatl.com. So I didn't get on the air Friday to do any aftermath. And here we are this morning on the first show of this week, and I am overtaken by the devastation that I'm seeing. Everywhere from South Georgia, of course the Florida coast, just manhandled. My beloved North Georgia mountains, North Carolina, Tennessee, I vacation any chance I get up there, and I'm just overwhelmed with what I'm seeing. And the scary thing is, because it's hard to get to a lot of these places right now, we're not even seeing it all. Also, my beloved hometown of Augusta, Georgia, just absolutely ransacked, and by surprise, essentially, when Helene took a little bit of an eastern pivot somewhere between Macon and I-20 and went a little more eastern than a lot of folks were predicting, and it seems as if everyone was caught by surprise. Joining me today is a good friend of mine, one of my former radio buddies back in Augusta, Georgia, Robb Smith. Robb Smith handles voiceover now. Robb has moved into the voiceover world. He worked like I did in radio for decades, and like me, is on the outside looking in as radio has just consolidated to the point where no one's in the studio anymore. And that's something we can talk about as well. Robb, thanks for joining us. By the way, also the host of Chewing the Fat with Big Rob, great podcast series to check out if you get a chance to on all the major podcast platforms. Robb, where you are, you have power and water. You're on the South Carolina side of things, right?
Yeah, I'm actually in North Augusta, so, right on the other side of the Savannah River from Augusta. Because we're Dominion Energy and not Georgia Power, the folks here in Aiken County, Edgefield County got a little jolt a little bit sooner because, and truthfully, there were tons of trees down, and there were a lot of areas that were hit bad over here. But compared to some of the stuff that I've seen from Augusta proper, it's just... And like I said, we just weren't prepared for this. We had thought that it was going to head more west. What are we from the coast? We're like 150, 160 miles from a coast at the closest. Mm-hmm. And so that far inland, we're like, well, we're not going to get a hurricane. We got hit with a Category 1 hurricane by the time it hit Augusta. It was still a Category 1 hurricane. Mm-hmm. Over here in North Augusta, the power came on late yesterday afternoon, mm-hmm. and so I drove over into Augusta and picked my mom up, and then drug her back over here kicking and screaming to a place where there's power and water, because Richmond County that she's in, they just let their folks know that they were going to be without water for 1 to 2 days because of the debris that got into the water treatment, filters, and they got to shut it down to clean it out to give people water. So they have no water, no power. It's Mad Max. It's just crazy.
And, you mentioned dystopia, and that's sort of what it feels like to live through these situations. Having lived in Louisiana post-Katrina, post-Rita, it was dystopian. For me, it's sort of deja vu all over again, because I'm a short drive away, and yet there's really nothing I can do. I've reached out to my family. I finally talked to my nephew overnight via Facebook Messenger, because cell phone signals are so wonky. Text messages aren't getting through, and phone calls aren't getting through. It's really hard to communicate to anybody in that area right now.
Yeah, we were without, like I said, we were without power for 4 days. And, we were like, okay, all right, without power, but the fact that we had no cell service so that
Yeah.
we could even get any internet to see what was going on, to see where there were resources or where we could find stuff that disconnection was the really dystopian part of it, because it's like you just kind of wandering around like, is there gas at this place? Do they have a way to, pump the gas? The gas stations around here, there's gas there, but there's no electricity to turn the pumps on so that they can actually pump the gas out. We drove to Columbia, South Carolina, which is like, an hour away, just to get gas in the car. Luckily, we had like a quarter tank, like, well, this is where we're going.
Ooh.
And we're able to get there and get the one car filled up with gas so that we had a car that was full of gas just in case we needed. And then got some propane tanks, little camp stove tanks, because that's what we were cooking on. We were cooking on a camp stove and going through whatever was in the fridge. It was just eerie. And it's okay when it's daytime. It's a whole different thing once it turns night.
Yeah.
Because that darkness comes. Now
it hits different, doesn't it? When there's no power, darkness hits different.
It does, and the silence. You don't, I mean, we could still hear cars on the highway where we are, but it wasn't as many, and there's no light pollution, and so I mean, it was beautiful. You could see all the stars in the sky. It was amazing, but also you're like, there's that fear and that unknown that creeps in too, because you're like, as much as you want to think well of the world and that we're all trying to get through this together, and as much as you see that during the light, once it gets dark, you're like, I can't see anybody, and is there some nefarious stuff going on out there that I don't know about? And it's just an internal fear. It's a fear of the dark. It's a fear of the unknown.
7 seasons of The Walking Dead will do that to you.
That's true. That did not help.
Yeah. And I was reading a story in the AJC today. My little hometown of Grovetown, the ingenuity involved there. The mayor telling folks, listen, you're going to lose food in your fridge and your freezer anyway. If you want to cook it, come on. They had a city facility set up with grills and stovetops and whatnot to cook things on, so that folks had food to eat. So they basically had cookouts for the last couple of days over the weekend in Grovetown. So kudos to Mayor Gary Jones for at least rallying the community to put the food that was going to go to waste to good use, so that folks had food to eat.
Yeah, so the folks have warm meals, things like that, because there are some people who don't have a camp stove or don't have a way, or a charcoal grill or something to cook something, and it's just going to go bad and it's going to stink and it's going to be in cause an even more unsanitary type condition. But yeah, and I've seen so many instances of that good neighborhood spirit and the coming together. We did that in our neighborhood. There are a few folks, like myself, had a camp stove. Folks had black stones. Folks had grills that worked on propane or charcoal. And they're like, hey, come on out. We're going to set up at the end of the driveway. If you got something to cook, come cook. If you don't want to cook, you want us to cook, we'll make a big stir fry of whatever you bring. Everybody has a warm meal, and you get to, the plus side is you get to know some of your neighbors too.
True.
But yeah, it's just odd. And to see downtown Broad Street, all of those old trees are all in the street now.
That's terrible.
Those old oaks and those things that are 30 feet tall and have been there since we grew up. It's like they're gone. They're not. You can't just stand them back up. They're going to have to be gotten rid of.
I saw that Augusta University campus lost 90% of its tree canopy.
Yep, 90% of the trees there. And it's you don't realize it when you're driving around that, like, oh wow, this is just what the town looks like. Yeah. The face of Augusta has changed because of so many trees that are down. So many. And now, granted, a lot of those trees is what caused a lot of damage on houses and stuff. I got a friend whose house was just about split in two by a pine tree falling right through the middle of it. Thank God they're okay. But like, it's just the look of Augusta, the way the town feels when you drive through. It's just different because you don't have those tall trees. You don't have that canopy to be like, hey, this is home. It looks almost new, you know what I mean? Because it's so unfamiliar.
Yeah. We're on with Robb Smith. Robb is a radio buddy of mine from back in the day in Augusta, Georgia. He also hosts Chewing the Fat with Big Rob. Robb is the reason that the Ron Show really even exists, if you want to be honest with you. I mean, I don't credit you enough for helping me get this show off the ground. I want to talk a little bit about the communication breakdown in Metro Augusta, because a lot of the complaining I hear from folks who are even able to charge their phones well enough and have a cell signal to post something on social media is that there's no way to get information. A storm of this devastation took out television stations and radio stations throughout the dial.
Yeah. You know, the stations that we worked at, 105.7, and the legend that used to be WBBQ, you know, 100,000 watt station back in the day that you could hear basically coast to coast, is dead. It's silent. And I have to believe part of that is because there are no jocks in that building. The company that bought it out and put us, you know, out of jobs, they don't have jocks that are local anymore. I don't even think they have a full-time engineer anymore.
Yeah.
It's a contracted engineer.
Yeah.
So they're worried about getting other stations up, and it's like, and it just sits there silent. And it makes me sad that, like, when we were there, all that's going on right now, they would be like, hey, you need to get to the station. And, you know, where we have to abandon our families and go through the stuff we're telling people not to get on the roads for. But that's part of why we loved what we do, to tell people, hey, this is where the roads are. This is where the resources are. This is where, you know, somebody's offering to charge phones, or you can get hot meals here, or you can, you know, whatever, exactly, or they're giving away packs of water here and this time. And that's what public airwaves are about. They're public.
And I was going to say, that's why the Federal Communication Commission exists. Holding an FCC license is a privilege, not a right. And it seems to be that with the consolidation of, and this isn't just, you know, a kick radio. This is a television issue as well. With the consolidation of broadcast media in this country, you just don't have that local touch anymore, or even the ability. I'm stunned, honestly, as I continue to check. And I like you, I go to WBBQ because when we were kids, we were growing up, not only was that like the 100,000 watt flame-throwing pop station, but they had a local news division in the building. We had vehicles on the streets doing call-in reports before that was even popular. Or even, you know, we didn't have cell phones when BBQ was doing, you know, CB radio check-ins on traffic. And we also, by the way, had huge generators behind the studio on Georgia Avenue, so that if anything did go wrong, we at least had a backup generator and transmitter. I probably couldn't have kids if I wanted to because of the transmitter radiation and whatnot. But I mean, we had something on the air no matter what, and not only is the station down, but I'm checking their social media, and I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned that no one. First of all, to let you behind the curtain a little bit, iHeartMedia has all these national feeds that feed their social media and their websites. And so you get all these pop culture stories that pertain to whatever the format is. BBQ is an adult contemporary station. And so you're learning about the Days of Our Live star who died on their social media, or that Lana Del Rey's husband's ex-fiance shared her true feelings on Lana's shock wedding, or that a Beverly Hills Cop actor passed away. This is what you're learning about on WBBQ social media right now. Meanwhile, the city of Augusta that WBBQ services has no power. Georgia Power is telling you till maybe Thursday, but you wouldn't know that by learning anything on WBBQ's Facebook page or website. I checked that too. You don't know that, gas stations have gas, but no generators to get. You just don't know these things because WBBQ is asleep at the switch. And I'm not picking on just one station. It's iHeartMedia in general. And I used to work for them in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We used to have regional confabs before storms like this hit, and we had an action plan in place. We would stop the national feeds. It would all be local information. We would all work together regionally, if not within the community of service, just to make sure that we were updating information as soon as it came to us. And it's crickets in there.
Yep. The two stations that I've heard that are still on the air giving local info. Well, the one that's given that I know is giving local information the most that I've heard is the local Christian station 88.3. WAFJ. They have their people there, and they are letting people know what's going on and where the resources are. WGAC, which is Beasley station,
News Talk.
It's News Talk. They simulcast on FM and AM. That's the only other station that I've heard, but I've still heard some of their network programming on. They've not just pulled programming to completely take over. But when you've got our buddy Austin on, he's obviously letting folks know what's going on.
Right.
But that's it. I mean, up and down the dial, every station it's those are the only two that I've heard anything of the major ones that you would think in this area that would be telling people about. And you just can't find out what's going on outside of this bubble that we're in, because there's no communication. We don't have cell service. We don't know where the resources are at. And as far as like the radio station goes, it's like, well, it was a good, it's a good investment.
Well, and I go to radio because radio is the medium that at some point in time, like if you've got gas in your car, you can turn on a radio. It's not as easy when you don't have power in your house. You can't turn on a television without power in your house. You can't turn on a television I guess you could put it on your phone now, but radio was the easy medium to access for the masses in an instant.
Yeah, you could even get those crank radios that you could just, wind up.
The Red Cross radios. Those are good.
Yeah, that you could crank up at least to hear something, to hear what's going on so that you know where to be and how to be safe. Because towns didn't, a lot of towns did away with tornado warning sirens and things like that, because, we've got the radio station, but they're going to, we'll be able to broadcast these things. And yes, you know what? I got like the Amber Alerts and things like that on my phone from, but it's like, hey, there's a curfew in place.
Okay.
It's 7 p.m., in Richmond County, 7 to 7 in Richmond County. And that's about it. There's no other information. Okay, great. Where can I get some stuff that I'm going to need before 7 p.m. so that you don't, find me for being out past curfew?
We're getting a lay of the land in the Metro Augusta region. My buddy Robb Smith, a.k.a. Big Rob of Chewing the Fat with Big Rob. Back with him in just a minute on The Ron Show. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms. That would be at Ron Show ATL. Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads. I'm going to share some links a little bit later so that you can donate to the organizations that you feel would best help those in need in the aftermath of and the path of destruction after Hurricane and Tropical Storm Helene. There are organizations like AmeriCares. Obviously, the American Red Cross comes to mind. There's an organization called Direct Relief. They're a humanitarian organization in all 50 states, 80 countries. And they seek to improve the health and lives of folks affected by poverty and emergencies. Also, the American Humane Society, always there to help with local animal shelters and folks who have lost their pets or have no means to feed their pets. Great organizations. I'll compile a list and have that for you at ronshowatl.com. We're on with Robb Smith, buddy of mine from back in my radio days in Augusta. He is Big Rob of the Chewing the Fat podcast as well. Do me a favor, anybody that you see, and it's going to have to be anecdotal because not everybody has cell service there. Tell everyone that, I'm reading today in the papers that you have 1,000 Georgia Power linemen on the ground as of yesterday. It'll be up to 5,000 in the next day or two. So power's coming back. We just got to get bodies down there, and they're dealing with so much devastation throughout the state and the region that.
Yeah, and luckily the National Guard and the State Guard came through and they've started clearing stuff, because that's what it is they had to come in to clear the stuff so that the linemen can do their job, because a lot of the transformers got hit and took the main power out. So it doesn't matter if the lines are, up off the road, there's no power coming from the transformers. So now they're able to do that. And that was another thing. We thought Florida was going to get hit hard, and they did. There was a good bit of people that got hit in Florida, but we had sent a lot of people down that way.
Right.
And now we've got to get them back up here. It's like, crap. It hit Augusta bad too. So we got to get everybody back up this way too and help, and then keep moving north. Like you said, getting up in North South Carolina and in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. It's going to be a long road for the Southeast to try and get back to some sort of normalcy. And like I said, as bad as it is here, we fare better than some other places. Chimney Rock's just gone
Oh yeah, I
in
know.
North Carolina.
I know. It's just
It's
heartbreaking.
just crazy.
All
So
right.
as my power came back on, that's the switch that turned on in mine. Is like, okay, how can I help
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
And reaching out to, hey, you need a hot shower, you need a place to stay, you need to be able to come get a hot meal. Reaching out to friends and saying, hey, come on. So that's the thing to keep in mind is once you get your resources back, how can you now assist others that don't have resources?
That's the way to be. Robb Smith, a.k.a. Big Rob, chewing the fat with Big Rob. Thanks for giving me an update this morning, and my best to you and your family and all those around you. Hope you guys get back
Yeah.
to 100% CSRA-like within a matter of days.
Yeah. We're hoping so. We're going to stay, as they say, Augusta strong.
Thanks for the time, buddy. I appreciate that. All right, so we have more to discuss in the aftermath of Helene. The destruction in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina is apocalyptic. It is unreal. And I have to ask, is it okay now? Is now the time to talk about climate change and action on it when we return?
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
As I mentioned at the start of the show, the destruction that we're seeing after Hurricane Helene ripped through Big Bend, Florida, southwest Georgia, into east central Georgia, into the Carolinas, eastern Tennessee, North Carolina. The destruction, the devastation is just breathtaking. We're approaching the peak fall season of travel for folks who are going to head up into like the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, the Appalachian Trail, West Virginia, to check out the fall colors. And there's so much devastation, so many trees down, impassable roads, and by the way, interstates. I believe I-40 between Asheville and Knoxville in Spates is impassable. Whole towns wiped away. If you've enjoyed traveling to Chimney Rock, North Carolina for a little weekend getaway, well, it's not there anymore. And by the way, Helene may not be the last of the hurricane season for this region of the United States. I'm reading this tweet that's kind of scaring the crap out of me. Who is this guy? Okay, so Brian McNulty is a senior research associate at the University of Miami Rosenthal School. He studies hurricanes and climatology, and he tweets... He tweets yesterday, the trend is not our friend. Odds are increasing of another storm developing in the Western Caribbean on Tuesday or Wednesday and then tracking northward into the Gulf by Thursday, Friday. A track towards Florida is what models have been showing with a possible landfall Saturday, Sunday. And damn if it doesn't look like a similar trajectory could be coming our way. If not into Georgia, at least the Big Bend area of Florida and across northern Florida. I'm just wondering at what point in time, and this is so like us as Americans. Woe is us. We are utterly devastated by this storm that approached the Big Bend, Florida coast as a Category 4, and still hundreds of miles inland was Category 1 as it ravaged between Atlanta and Augusta on its way up into Asheville. Woe is us. Absolutely. We have more than 80 dead, hundreds, if not thousands, injured, billions, if not trillions of dollars in damage. We have folks who can't even leave their subdivision or community because of impassable roads. They are without power. They're going to run out of food, clean water, the things we take for granted, outside of Atlanta, the things we take for granted. And I hate to always just draw this back to politics. How is it that we are in such a tight race between Green New Deal and drill baby drill? I'm just gobsmacked by this. Why is this so hard for us? I'm going to give you a little bit of a sidebar rant, I guess, to just say, I, as someone who likes to think of myself as a tells it like it is, sees it like it is, sort of political pundit. I have been tough on Biden-Harris when I don't feel like they've done enough or pushed far enough or hard enough. I was really concerned about an octogenarian running for re-election. The polling told me what it told the rest of us and Democratic operatives, obviously inside the party, and eventually President Joe Biden himself. That being said, we have an energy sector that is far more diversified today than we did 4 years ago. And there are political operatives on the opposite side who are going to tell you that it's that sort of shift politically that is the cause for the spike in gas prices that we've seen at the pump. It's not true. We've actually been cranking out more fossil fuel domestically in the United States at this point now than at any time in American history before. Much to my chagrin. I'm not bragging about that. But that is the fact. But we've also diversified our energy sector. We are pivoting towards a green energy future. Perhaps not fast enough. Mother Nature's telling us, step on it. Well, she steps on us. But we are moving in a more green energy direction. I mean, day one, we rejoined the Paris Climate Accord. And I guess this is where I bring in, oh, by the way, it ain't just us that's dealing with this. There are more than 60 dead in Nepal right now because of extreme flooding. There is a massive typhoon in the Pacific that will ravage Asia. There are floods all across the planet right now that we're not even hearing about. And you have to wonder, why aren't we hearing about it? Believe it or not, there's a website. There's a need for a website called Floodlist. Oh, man. Floodlist.com, where there's evidence of flooding in Germany and in France and in Afghanistan. Afghanistan. Do you ever think about flooding in Afghanistan? Indonesia, Uruguay, Oman, Argentina, New Zealand, Great Britain, Pakistan. I was reading a Twitter thread earlier today that just had me aplomb with stunned, surprised, maybe? No, I can't even say that anymore because I'm not. I'm just not stunned. I'm not surprised by the cognitive dissonance that exists across the political spectrum. This one individual questioning, well, we've had hotter air on this planet and animals thrived. Yes, they adapted. They evolved to that point. It took time for animal species to evolve to be able to thrive to that point. But it's the now. It's where we are now where humanity thrives and the animal population around us thrives, so that humanity can continue to exist and live. Evolution takes time. It's not overnight. Adaptation happens faster. Evolution happens slower. And we're fortunate, I guess, as humans, in some sense, that because of the evolution of our minds, although I'd question that, because of the evolution of our minds, we are able to more quickly adapt. But the adaptation that we're seeing across the globe, in some respects, is migration. Is the light starting to shine in the attic there for you? Are you starting to see it now? Is it coming together? The dots connecting? Yes, migration, movement, getting out of harm's way is one of the ways humans adapt. And migration is a no-no to those who live where they believe they are safe and sound. Are you safe and sound? Anyway, it's a no-no for those who live in a place where they believe they are safe and sound and where others see as safe and sound environment. Don't come here. Don't want you to upset the apple cart. And the thing that gets me is not even talking about the political, the geopolitical ramifications of, or even militaristic, or picking winners and losers, our hostility to anything not democracy or free market capitalism in some other country anywhere near us. Because of all of that meddling in Central and South America, we have folks who are living in destabilized political and economic environments who are coming here. But we don't talk enough, in my mind, about the environmental ramifications of the good life we live, the fossil fuel-based lifestyle that we enjoy in the United States and in most of the Western world, and the impacts that it has on the global environment and how that contributes to the migration that a lot of folks on the right go, ugh, ew, don't come here, stay where you are. Yeah. Other side of the wall. I've mentioned a few times on this show before that the Biden-Harris administration had been working, I believe, almost from day one, within the first 3 months. The job that Vice President Harris was tasked with was not to be a border czar. It was to identify and mitigate root causation of migration. Specifically for her, the task was the Northern Triangle: El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. 3 countries that are affected by political instability, economic instability, and yes, climate change. Those on the right will just say, now's not the time. We need to help our neighbors. Absolutely, we need to help our neighbors. We need to do all that we can. But we also have to have that sober conversation. It's almost like the conversation you're having with Grandpa when it's time to take the keys. We had this conversation at the Democratic Party, but it's also time to have this conversation about the realities of our current and our future. I believe that there's almost this acceptance. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. No, that's not true. There is something we can do about it. We need to start talking about that's something we can do about it, because it seems pretty obvious that the path we're on climatologically is untenable for not just the future and not the far off future, the near future and the now. I don't know how I came across this Twitter platform account. Dr. Genevieve Gunther, Dr. Viv, V-I-V-E, she goes by on the Twitter X platform. She's the founding director of End Climate Science and wrote a book called The Language of Climate Politics. She tweeted, "The disasters in North Carolina and Nepal, the repeated heat of over 110 degrees in California and Arizona." By the way, Phoenix set another record yesterday, 113 degrees. Beat the old record by 6 degrees yesterday. Anyway, she writes that these are symptoms of a planetary cancer that will get worse and worse, potentially metastasizing out of control until we stop using coal, oil, and methane gas. She tweets, "Remember, later is too late." Herb Simmons chimes in, "There's no scientific evidence that stopping use of coal, oil, and methane will prevent climate change from getting worse." Again, Herb is like, there's nothing we can do about it. It's so bad now we can't do anything about it. And Dr. Genevieve, chimes in with a link that says, that's not what scientists say. And she provides a link from carbonbrief.org. I'll share that. And the Twitter exchange. It's breathtaking to read the back and forth on the lack of a grasp of knowledge of what evolution is. Evolution isn't, well, I can adapt and be better prepared tomorrow. No, that's simple adaptation. Evolution is an internal physiological, biological change that takes generations, hundreds, thousands, millions of years to present itself. Anyway, I'll give you all of that to read at ronshowatl.com. And this happens after a mass shooting. It happens after a major climate event. We have these conversations about these uncomfortable conversations about the sort of change that needs to be made. And the instant reaction on the right is always, well, now's not the time. No, actually, now is the time. I said this after the school shooting in Winder, Georgia. Governor Kemp didn't want to talk about it. No, now's not the time. But now is the time. And I would actually think that maybe Governor Kemp is probably at least amenable to having a discussion about climate science and climate change, because he's been pretty pro-business. If it's about the economy, it's been pretty good pro-business to talk about electric battery plants, electric vehicle manufacturing. Can we now start talking about green energy, pivoting towards that? And oh my God, can we talk about burying power lines? I know that's not the end-all be-all solution for keeping power going, but my God, I live in a major city, the 10th largest metropolitan area in the country, and I'm still blown away that I live in Old Fourth Ward and travel through downtown and midtown Atlanta, and I still see so many power lines above ground. What is that about? Why can't we, while we're doing all of these major road projects, get the power lines buried? And can we not talk about self-sustainability? Should there not be better, more powerful tax credits for home builders and homeowners to solarize their homes so that, God forbid, if a scenario like Helene comes and the power company tells you, sorry, our linemen are scattered all throughout the South because we didn't know where the storm was going. We guessed, and we guessed wrong, and that's nobody's fault. But in the meantime, if you had solar power coming into your home that could cover, 50, 60, 75% of the power needs at minimum, you would think, right? You could get by. You could limp by with that. We got to talk about more credits for residential buildings, homes, for folks to be able to solarize so that when another Helene comes, they're not having to throw all their food away or go to the town square and cook it with all their neighbors and share it. I mean, that's a good thing, actually, but these very real and very adult conversations we just don't seem to have, except after a mass casualty event like a mass shooting or a massive hurricane, tropical storm, what have you. But I'm going to have that conversation. I'm going to keep having that conversation. I'm going to reach out to experts who want to have that conversation with me, and that's what I hope you expect as well. This is The Ron Show. Final 3 minutes of today's Ron Show. Something I was talking with my old coworker Robb Smith about was just the degradation of any local media presence in cities like Augusta, Georgia. There's like 750,000 people in the metro Augusta area. It's not nothing. It's not Atlanta, but it's not nothing. That's a lot of people to rely on. Not a lot of folks in radio and TV studios. When I grew up, you had channels 6, 12, and 26 with news. 54 came along later, and I think they sort of had a little bit of a local news presence, but you had 3-ish options for local news. 2 for most of my childhood. 26 came in a little bit later and finally built a news presence. And that's actually kind of regressed. I think 6 and 54 are working together. I think 12 and 26 work together. I think 12 and 26 are owned by the same people now. So you don't have the sort, and look, local television news budgets continue to shrink nationally. There are fewer bodies out there getting the local stories. And when you watch local news in a city like Augusta, you get a lot of national fed stuff, fluff, crud, not local news. It happens in radio as well, where you don't even have local talent handling local social media, let alone local websites or local content on the air. You don't have, as Robb mentioned, even a local engineer to get your transmitter site back up as soon as possible. Or have a backup transmitter site with a generator ready to roll, fully gassed, to keep folks informed. The newspaper that I worked at while in high school, the Augusta Chronicle, was the paper of record. Hundreds of thousands of subscribers. It is a shell of its former self. I also worked radio in Mobile, Alabama, by the way. Mobile, a bigger market than Augusta, Georgia, does not have a local newspaper anymore. And I get it. You're like, who needs a newspaper? Well, you need a .com, a Mobile Register.com, Augusta Chronicles, digital footprint. Again, there aren't a lot of local reporters anymore, so there's not a lot of local information. I'm getting more from reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about Augusta than I am from Augusta media sources. Mirtha Donistorg reporting from Augusta, letting me know more about what's happening in Augusta than Augusta's media entities are able to. Quotes from the mayor of Augusta, Garnett Johnson, the worst natural disaster in our city's history. And as someone who grew up in Augusta and kind of knows the history, I can't really argue with him on that, by the way. I mean, there have been historic floods and fires, but nothing, I think, of this widespread devastation. This is where I learned about the fact that Georgia Power is telling folks, it might be Thursday, October 5th at the earliest, to try and get the majority of those without power again. That they had 1,000 Georgia Power linemen there to get the work done, and that they're expecting up to 5,000. It's where I learned about not the gas shortages, but the pumps not being able to operate without power. Plenty of gas there, just not an ability for folks to get it. It's where I learned about my hometown of Grovetown, Georgia, and the mayor saying, hey, if you got food in the freezer, food in the fridge, or it's going to go bad and you need to cook it, come on down to this city utility building, and we've got propane tanks and grills and, communal cookout. I learned more about that sort of behavior in my hometown of Augusta from outside news organizations than I did from the news organizations that used to service they call it the CSRA, Central Savannah River Area. CSRA, yeah. Just call it Metro Augusta. I always said that when I was there. Just call it Metro Augusta. It's too hard to remember. There's nothing in Augusta in the name that tells you that the CSRA is Augusta. It's Metro Augusta. Anyway, there's just so little media there to cover it. I do keep my eye on my conservative friend there, the Austin Road Show on social media, and boy, he caught a lot of hell because the station that he's on was gleefully announcing, hey, we're going to air the Georgia-Alabama game Saturday night. And I can appreciate as much as anybody college football and a little diversion from hard times. And folks were like, can I just find out where there's an open gas station and somewhere to clean up or when power will be back on? There's a vacuum of information, and that has come from, do we call it free market capitalism, or do we just call it big fish devouring small fish, and then the bigger fish coming in to devour that big fish, and a big fish devouring that? Yeah, that's where we are. We don't think of it as our First Amendment rights eroding, but that's kind of what's happening because the levers, the controls, the megaphones, the microphones are in the hands of fewer people than they were 20, 25, 50 years ago. And I don't know the solution to it. I don't know what the evolutionary process will be for information gathering and dispersing. But it's sad that local radio, local television, and the presence of a local newspaper is letting hundreds of thousands of people down right now. I mean, maybe podcasting is that evolutionary step. I don't know. I want to thank Robb for joining me today, and thank you for listening to The Ron Show here on the America One Radio app. Weekdays 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. Also at Progressive Voices via TuneIn 7 to 8 p.m. and then wherever you podcast. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.